very dear, respected audience, my students, and the people who love to listen to my lectures. Very warm welcome to Dr. Ahmed YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk on New Historicism. New Historicism is also a literary theory for the interpretation of literature. Greenblatt is the person who is responsible for this. He in the 1920s came forward in order to talk about his vision about the interpretation of literature, especially in America. He thought that things should be interpreted with reference to the time and space so that the better meaning may be understood. And so his theory was named as New-Historicism. Yes, if we try to see the other theories which were happening at the same time, that's like structuralism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, all these theories seem to disconnect the meaning of literature from the author or the space in which the literature was created. So it was an attempt on the part of Greenblatt to reconnect the pieces of literature, their analysis and their meaning with the time and space in which the literature was being produced. So in that sense, this theory was called as New-Historicism. Well, it is a little bit different from historicism because the scholars of historicism just put the question what happened and how it happened. But the scholars of New Historicism come forward and say that what was the interpretations of these happening of the events. So their meaning mostly depends on the interpretation, effect of these interpretations, whether these interpretations were right or wrong. In that way, they differ from historicists and are called therefore New Historicism. So in that way, the interpretations are really very much important in case of expressing and using this theory of New Historicism. We can say that this allocation of interpretations or the understanding of the meaning relates very much to Foucault's concept of esteem. Because Foucault also, while explaining his concept, the concept of esteem, said that the scientific knowledge can be better understood only with reference to the time and space. Without that, it cannot be understood better. So in this way, Foucault also supported the similar ideology which Greenblatt brought forward. According to many authors, many writers, for example, in Richter's opinion, Richter, one of the historicists, Richter's opinion, the historic moment is very much important in which the event is being created, in which piece of literature is being created. According to Richter, we can understand it better if we have in our mind who was the person who created it and what was the type of age and what were the cultural happenings around him because of which he created. And ultimately, we can interpret and understand what are the dominant things in the meanings of these words which have been created at a specific moment. Same is the case with Tyson, who also talked about the receiving meaning with respect to the interpretations of the event at that time. So in this way, again and again, one idea is coming forward that these interpretations are very much important, which were made by the people about different happenings in the history, events in the history, or the kind of cultural happenings in the history. That moment becomes really very much important, and the interpretations of those words and the meanings become even more important, on the basis of which we can understand what was really happening at that time. So one can proceed further and see how this theory further works. We can say that this theory is not based on facts, is not based on the facts provided by the text. So it is less of objective. I mean, the interpreter cannot go on objectivity. A little bit of subjectivity is always there. That we will depend on, not given bare facts as historicism used to be. New historicism talks about the kind of interpretations given by different scholars, different interpreters, or the way the text goes to behave in that age and know what is happening with respect to that. So that is why there is an element of subjectivity also involved into it, as compared to historicism, which only involved the element of objectivity. And so in this regard, the place and time become very much important. So in order to understand it further, we can have some points in this theory. That first of all, it is to be seen what were the political, social, or even financial interpretations and implications of the events which took place at that time. And because of this, how much the writer has given indications or any points or any references to those interpretations of the time, from where it can be judged what was the time, what was the space and place, and how has the writer dealt with that. This would be the very first thing to be talked about by the person who is using and exploiting this theory of New Historicism and finding these things in the text as well. Secondly, it is to be seen that the words which have been used, what meaning did those words do at that time when the text was being produced. And after that, in this age, after 1 year or 3 year or 50 year, the next person who is using and reading that text according to New Historicism, what is the kind of change in those meanings? What is the kind of implications of these words after passage of time? So this difference between the current meaning of the words and the meaning which were carried out at the time the text was being produced, that would be very helpful in understanding the whole text. So that is why this difference is also to be understood. And then it is to be seen that whether the interpretations made at that time were in favor of the events which were taking place or these were against that. That will help us learn whether the author was intending to write something against the type of things which were happening at that time or he was in favor of that. And from the text we can very clearly generalize and see whether it was against or in favor of, or what was happening at that time when the text was created and what is the situation right now. In the same way, we will have to see, according to the interpretations of the meanings of the words in the text, according to the people who lived in that age, we could see that whether the people have criticized the piece of text by saying that it is not right or it is projecting a wrong image, or we can also go to see whether it was appreciated, as could be possibly the case when the critics and theorists go to understand the text given at that time. In the same way, we can create a relationship between the events which took place at that time with the events which are taking place in the current time when any researcher is analyzing. This relationship would also pave a very good way in order to understand the real meaning of the text which were present at that time in the mind of the author, or what the text is going to refer to the past incidents, it is referring to the current one as well. That would be a very good way of understanding. And lastly, it should also be seen that whether the people who were marginalized people at that time, who were oppressed people at that time, the moment of history when the text was being created, whether the writer talked about them, advocated about them, or simply ignored them. In this way also, the interpretation will suggest whether the writer or the people associated writer were in favor of these things or they were against that thing. So it will be a very good way of understanding literature with respect to historicism and then ultimately to New Historicism to get a better meaning and vision of the text being given. We can say that New Historicism, as it has been produced as a theory by Greenblatt and later on it was supported by Catherine Gallagher, these two people have tried to understand the meaning of the text, especially when they were the scholars of Renaissance age. So they considered Shakespeare, to the text Shakespeare created, to be the best pieces of literature to be interpreted with respect to New Historicism. And they found that when they interpret the text according to this ideology, that space, time and author should be kept in mind before getting the meaning, they could interpret the text in a very better way. His book, Greenblatt's book that he wrote, many works he has done on it, and one of the works I am mentioning here, that is Hamlet in Purgatory. Hamlet in Purgatory is the title of the book. In this book also he went so far to discover the representations of the ghosts by Shakespeare, what is the meaning of that, and he found it very good way by relating it to the Catholic religion, the Protestant religion as well. So by this example, we can have many more examples of Shakespearean text or the text of many other authors when we try to interpret the text with reference to New Historicism. For example, the drama Tempest by Shakespeare can also be understood very well if it is interpreted with respect to the timing and space and the other things which are related to that. So in that way, Greenblatt provided a platform to have a new understanding of the things which are presented in the text by the authors. Especially it can be understood very well when we relate it to the history, the events of history, not simply the events and facts of the history, but also keeping in mind how the interpretations were done at that time and how these interpretations affected the text at that time and how it is affecting the reader of this time, and the differences could be understood between that time and this time. In this way, the text could be very better understood. So we can say that even New Historicism is meant to understand the meaning of the text better. And in one way, in my view, this is a better way to understand, because we cannot understand the text when it is created in a specific set of circumstances with respect to the context, with respect to the time, with respect to the political, social and financial conditions, and with respect to the author himself. So that is why it is going to be a very good way of interpretation of the text. So thank you for watching this. Hopefully you have understood something, and if it is so, do not hesitate to click the subscribe button as well as the like button. Your comments or suggestions will also be taken care of. Thank you for watching.